Hello, my name is Sydney Alder, and this is my video presentation on push daggers. Before we get to push daggers, we must begin with the history of knives. Knives have been around for thousands upon thousands of years, and is one of the most important tools that help people create our civilization today. Knives have been a very vital, important part of survival, combat, construction, and food. Knives in more prehistoric times were made of stone, bone, and wood, and would later be made out of metal, which provided different designs and durability. And once knife making had become more evolved, different sizes appeared, which created swords, axes, spears, but that is a different story. On to the history of daggers. Daggers began with the discovery and mining of metals. The first daggers made was out of copper, and then copper was mixed with tin and became bronze daggers. They were patterned after the double-edged stone knives previous. And at this point in time of the copper and bronze age of daggers, they were more used secondary in combat. So when their longer knives or spears had wear down, then they would have a dagger when they needed it, just in case. The Iron Age daggers, of course, was created out of iron, and that suited the daggers to be a lot stronger, flexible, and they tended to last longer. And at this point, craftsmanship with iron was amazing. It was impeccable. For medieval daggers, there was a technique of layering strands of steel to produce stronger daggers. And this implement actually lended itself to Japanese sword making, and is one of the top things that came out of the medieval period. Of the early Renaissance, daggers were still used mainly as backups and considered the most elegant. For the late Renaissance, there came to be more of an end of swords as a main use for war, or at least for protection in war. There was an appearance of daggers used on bayonets with the introduction of firearms into the late century, and that kind of turned the bayonets into their own type of spear in a close combat range. Now, before we jump right into the history of push daggers, I will say there are other types of daggers that came after the push dagger, but since I wanted to focus on push daggers, I will not go into those other ones. So the push dagger made its first appearance in World War I. Now, World War I had a lot of trench warfare engagement, which means that the soldiers were mainly digging tunnel like sections into the ground that people could fit into. Sometimes the barracks would end up being in there. A lot of it was just for protection and keeping watch. So if an attacker came up, they'd be able to basically almost do a sneak attack on them. And with World War I, 3 types of knives in particular came about, and that is trench knives, the push daggers, and bowie knives. Again, I will mainly focus on the push dagger. And one thing that really stood out with the push dagger was its unique design. It's unlike most knives that had been created at the time, and the part that you actually would hold on to, not the handle, but it would be the pommel, which is the technically the end of your knife or sword, the very end tip. And that was usually made out of metal or wood. And the blade or dagger itself is in the shape of a T. So when holding the push dagger, the pommel would be in between your middle and index fingers. Now here are a couple of visuals of your most standard version of push daggers. The steel one is double-edged, and the other one only has the one edge to it. And the handles themselves are different, and I believe that also can pertain to how you're holding the weapon. Some other push daggers I noticed that were available came in different sizes within blades and even handles. One of them that I found interesting, you could fit around your middle finger with the handle, and the blade was about a few inches, and it was a lot more compact than these type of standardized versions. When owning and carrying one's push dagger, you have to be aware of how you are housing the weapon on your person. And the most traditional ways of doing so include the back, preferably on the hips and not the spine, or the boot. One doesn't really want to choose options that are more visible or easier to catch onto, such as drawing into one's vest or pocket. And when you are about to show this weapon or engage in such combat, there's something called the sweep, where your guard hand comes up and the hand that you will then use to hold your weapon is secure. And then after the sweep is the presentation, where the hand with the weapon now comes forward and the guard hand falls back a bit behind the weapon holding hand, but in a protective stance. The 2 basic thrusts include a straight punch and an uppercut shove that can either be straight or upward, and the blade can be vertical or horizontal. Slashes can also be straight or canted, which means that the blade is held at an angle. One thing to be highly aware of is that the push dagger is dangerous based upon the idea of coming from a level that is not eye level. Therefore, if someone engages in combat with someone with a push dagger, you're going to want to be aware of your whole person, because it is more of a thrusting type of weapon. It's not really meant for fighting. It's more about protecting. Sadly, I could not find any gruesome pictures of wounds from push daggers, but from website aids and teaching me how to use them, I will explain some of the wounds involved. When going with the uppercut thrust, the main goal is to be attack from under the ribs, hitting any major organs that you can. If that is not accessible and the attacker is coming at you possibly with their blade, you might want to try to get your blade in between their forearm and the elbow crease to cut the major artery there. If not, then you might go for an attack at the shoulder blade and hit a major artery there. The point with the push dagger is that it will cause damage at any location on the body. Usually with in close contact, the main goal is to just stab any major organs that you can, and if not, then going for the arteries. And here is my source list. Most of the pictures I used in the slides, I put the title next to them. Mainly it was Pixabay unlisted otherwise. And these 4 sources helped me a lot with all my information, especially not knowing much about push daggers, but now I do. And I hope you enjoyed this video.